Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to module number 8, finally. We want to continue on with using Ploty.Express, but now I want to introduce CSS grid formatting to properly place the graphs on our web page. Remember, again, this is a dashboard, so we want multiple little graph snippets. We want like a nice summary of information that then anybody viewing the report, any report viewer, can drill down to more specific information. So that requires us to format the data and have it placed in a little better situation. Have it placed in side by side in modular little boxes so that we could fit more graph information in. Now, firstly, just like before, remember, make sure your Octeto is up. If you log into your Octeto, you should see all greens. If you don't, you're going to see a white wake all button. Go ahead and click it. It's okay if you see one of your red buttons, your development environment's red, you haven't logged in yet. So that's part of the problem. All right, and just like before, open up your Atom, like I have right here. Right, open up Atom, and you're going to do Octeto login, Octeto namespace, and Octeto up. And then you should be in here. And then go ahead and enter your virtual environment. Once you enter your virtual environment, please go ahead and do pip install for all your requirements. All right, and under module 7, I have all my latest pip installs. So you can grab that if you don't have everyone. I have all the ones you need. Go ahead, execute that, and all your libraries should be loaded up. All right, from there, we want to now finally introduce the concept of CSS files, right? So we start off with opening up going to our static files in CSS right here, right? And I'm going to put two pieces of code in there. Let me zoom in a little bit. The first one being dot container, squiggly brace, squiggly brace. The second class will be dot item, squiggly brace, squiggly brace. Now, these, if you want to call them class definitions, if you will, in CSS, these are, again, variable names. You can name them anything you want. The standard practice is to name, when you're using what we call, quote unquote, a CSS grid, is to call the outer box that holds a container. But again, you can name anything you want. Now notice the syntax. I do dot plus the new class name. Now again, in CSS files is where we define, quote unquote, classes that we will later use in our HTML files. And the purpose of these classes is to format and design and put all kind of aesthetics onto those HTML attributes. That is how you adjust the colors, the fonts, font styles, the sizes, the positioning of the pictures, the images, the data, all this stuff. That's how it's done. It's done via in the CSS code that is then called upon by the HTML file. Now, what's happening here is that I have a couple commands in the first one, the container, right? Again, dot container, dot item. Display colon grid, semicolon. What's that line doing basically? All right. Basically what's happening here is this display grid is basically telling HTML, hey, this guy, this class right here is defining a CSS grid. What is a CSS grid? A CSS grid is simply a grid structure or a table structure on your HTML page that you may be able to see or not see. It doesn't matter. The purpose of this grid structure is so that you can place elements in your HTML page like a grid. Extremely powerful, extremely flexible. It's like the latest way to do aesthetic designs or do layouts in HTML, if you will. CSS Grid, most browsers support it. It's very easy, again, and it's the latest in how it's done. Now the basic way is I mean, it gets pretty advanced. CSS gets pretty advanced. I mean, you could do animation in CSS. That's how powerful it is, right? But the basic way, basically how it works, is I can define either rows or columns or both. In this case, I define both columns and rows, right? And the keyword for that is grid template columns. And again, see, the HTML page will understand what that means because we started off by saying, hey, we gave the magic word display colon grid semicolon, which means this is a CSS grid. Roll with it. So in line 3, we're saying grid template dash columns. What we're saying is we're defining how many columns we're having and the size of our columns. All right. So now you see me have 5 values here. All right. The first value is 1FR, 266PX, 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 1FR. This means I have 5 columns I'm designating right there. 5 columns I'm designating of different widths. Now, let's look at the second, third, and fourth column. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right, 266, 266, 266, PX. That PX stands for pixels. As you guys know, your computer, your phone screens are made up of different pixel sizes. And you can adjust those pixel sizes, those depths, right, when you go into your options. We're hard coding the second, third, and fourth to be the columns to have a width of 266 pixels. Now, typically, that is not a good idea when you're designing HTML pages because people have different formats for their screens. People could be on a computer, people could be on an iPad, people could be on a cell phone. Those screens have different dimensions. You typically do not want to fix the width by pixels. Unfortunately, as I was telling you guys on Thursday, I was doing my best to research Plotly graph size adjustment. And it turns out you can only do it by pixels, which is very unfortunate. So I finally gave up and just went with it. Because Plotly forces us into these to output graphs in certain pixel sizes when we want to adjust it, we have no choice but to use that same kind of width of measurement for our column sizes, and subsequently for our row sizes as well. So here, second, third, and fourth column, I make them the width 266 pixels. All right. Now, what's going on with the first and fifth column? They have this value 1FR. All right. What is FR? FR basically stands for a fractional unit. All right. And it basically corresponds to the free space in the website, in the web page. Okay. Now, these 3 columns are fixed. Can't do anything about that. But any remaining space, if there is any, that falls under FR, fractional space. And look, we have other unit of measurements in CSS. We have percentages. We have something called EM, something called REM. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? But there's different ways we can use different units of scales to adjust our fonts, our images, our columns, our rows. So in this case, we're using something called, and this is from CSS Grid, by the way, specifically, this unit of measurement, FR, for free fractional, basically fractional space. So what happens here is if there is any space on the screen, and you'll see that later, the additional space will be split among this column and that column, right? If there's whatever space there is, it'll be split among the first and last column, and it'll just adjust according to whatever free space there is. So it's very flexible. And the reason why I'm doing this is because of the fact that we're constrained by the fact that we need to have set pixels in our graphs. I want to put a little bit of a buffer on the sides of the graphs, just so we can attempt to be a little more flexible depending on different screen sizes. And again, you'll see that a little bit later. All right, so 5 columns, 3 of which where I'm going to put the graphs, or I mean, we'll do that probably in the next module. We're just using our 2 graphs for now. But I can show you guys, I can mess around with that and show you guys that a little bit later. And the first and fifth column are basically just buffers for aesthetic purposes. All right. Now, Grim template rows. What's going on here? Grim template rows basically I'm also creating 2 rows. So 5 columns total, 2 rows. Now, notice this funky way I did it. Now, I could have created 2 rows like this if I wanted to. Let me just show you. I go down 200 pixels, 200 pixels. And by the way, if you don't know now, the dimensions we're gonna adjust our graph to is width of 266 pixels and height of 200 pixels. All right, that's where it's coming from. So look, in lines 4 and 5, I'm doing the same thing. I'm setting 2 rows with now the length, I shouldn't say that, but the height of the rows now will be 200 pixels. In line 5, all I'm doing is I'm doing the same thing, but I'm using a cool repeat function in CSS. And yes, CSS has functions that you can use, right? It gets pretty fancy, it gets pretty cool. So you could do either line 4 or line 5. I stuck line, let me go delete this. I stuck line 5 in there really just to show you the repeat function. It's pretty cool. So all it's doing is just repeating twice this to make 3 rows. If I wanted to make 4 rows, I would just of 200 pixels, I would just change that 2 to 4, and then it would make 4 rows of 200 pixels. All right. Grid auto rows here. I'm going to delete this for now. You guys don't need to know that right now. I think I do have to delete in my slides. Yes, I do. Excellent. All right. And then gap 5 pixels. What is this? Well, this is basically, you see how we're creating these 5 columns and 2 rows. Well, so now we have basically 10 boxes, if you will. We're defining 10 boxes on our HTML page. The gap is doing exactly what it's saying it's doing. It's basically setting how much space you want from each one of those boxes. We could have no space, 0, or in this case, I have 5 pixels separating the boxes. All right? 5 pixels separating the boxes. Now, that's one class I'm defining. I'm defining another class called .item that is now going to, I'm using this to now further design the individual grid boxes. All right? So look, hypothetically, maybe I could put some of this code there. So here I'm using a property called text align center. This allows me to center any text in those boxes. I'm also going to, I don't have it here, I'll go ahead and do it right here. I'm going to add a background color to this item. And I'm doing this just so it's easy for you guys to see what's going on here. I'll just type it in how to build it. I can't spell. Right, no, not light gray, light gray. There you go. All right, excellent. Save this. And now, we now want to, okay, so I have our CSS, we have our CSS defined right here, right, under static. We're using it, good. Now what we want to do is we want to change up the HTML file. All right, we want to change up the HTML file. So I'll go here, and I already have this. Let me go ahead and delete this for now. I'll bring those back in a second, guys. All right, now there's 2 things we do. No, more than 2 things, but there's 2 major things we do. Firstly, under head, we add line 4. Link href, whatever this is, rel style sheet. All right, first let's start off with link href. What link href basically means, href is basically talking about, href is usually a keyword for saying, hey, I'm linking some file to this HTML page. So there's some other file I'm looking to this HTML page. This other file that we're looking at the HTML page is our style.css page. We want to link it to our web page. This is how our web page is able to call those classes. We need to link it somehow. All right? It's the same concept as importing, guys. It's the same concept as importing, right? So in here in the rel keyword, we're saying, hey, this link file we're linking is a style sheet. All right, so we're giving a heads up to the web page so it knows what to do with it. Now, what's happening in here? All right, so what's happening in here is we're using a function called, do I have it here? URL underscore 4. URL underscore 4, what it does is, and notice I have it in the squiggly braces, right? Remember, anytime you have two double squiggly braces, you got Python code going on there. Or should I say, Jinja is calling Python code within the HTML page. All right, now the Python code is calling is this function, URL underscore 4. What this function does is it basically dynamically creates the path, the file path of where this particular style.css exists. Notice in my path function, there's two parameters. In my path, my second one, my path parameter, I simply just do /style.css. And in my first one, I simply have static. You guys see what's going on here. I'm basically saying, hey, from the static folder, right? From the static folder, whatever that's defined to be, grab the style.css file, right? Notice I just have one slash here. I could, if I hypothetically in the static folder, I could have other folders and then other CSS files in it, and then we could add more, slashes and the names of the other subfolders. But here I'm just saying, within the static page, give me my style.css file. Now remember, the reason this is working from module 7, when I talked about it, is over here in line 17, we define what static is. We define what, when you use the word keyword static, right, what it's talking to. It's talking to a directory named static that exists over here. Bam. We define that. And so now we're using it, right? We're using it. So I'm calling the keyword static, and I'm saying within static, grab this file. Bam. And then we're saying, hey, that's a style sheet. Link it up to this page. We're good. We're good. That's how it's done. And that's how it's done dynamically too. Because what happens is I can have all kinds of HTML files, right, with different kind of URLs and different paths. And I don't need to keep track of where the style.css file is relative to these HTML pages I create. They could be all over the place in my project. But because this is dynamic, and I defined what this was in a key value, in a value word, this URL underscore function takes care of business for me. Very handy. Very handy when you're making dynamic HTML pages. All right, so that's step 1. Step 2 is I add additional HTML tags. In this case, I'm adding HTML tags that are called div, D-I-V. Now, what div stands for is basically division of space in the HTML, or division of area within an HTML page. div allows you to apply different CSS definitions to different parts of your HTML page. It allows you to, from an aesthetic or design point of view, break up which part of the page is being affected by which class or classes. So in this case, I have an outer division of space called container. Again, notice how I'm calling these styles.css. Even though they're defined as dot here, when I call it, I use the keyword class. Within the HTML tags, equals, and then the class I want to call, container. Now this outer div right here is defined as that container class word, or that container CSS class word. That CSS class word, if you recall again, like I just said before, defines a grid. So this right here, from line 9 to line 16, will now become that grid. It's now defined, that division of space in the HTML page now becomes that grid that we defined. Okay? Now within that part of the HTML page, I'm defining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more division of spaces. I'm further subdividing that page, right, into 5 or 6 more subdivisions of space within that division. All right, and those divisions I'm defining as something else now. Item. From here, item. So what happens here is anything inside this class will inherit whatever's happening here, right? So whatever rules it specifies there, these guys will follow. And obviously, whatever's within the brackets here I'm putting these, whatever values you put between the brackets, that's what gets, again, displayed in the HTML page. So literally, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So what's happening here is I have six divisions of space of HTML space, or whatever you want to call it, areas of HTML space within my container space. That container space is a grid. All right, so for each HTML element I add, it's going into each specific grid. I remember I have 5 columns, 2 rows. I have 10 grid areas set up. So each HTML element is going to go to each one of those grids, guys. This goes to one cell, to the other, to the other, to the other, right? So therefore, your page is going to look like, let me fire this up. All right, do I have my browser? Let me grab my browser. Ta-da. This is what happens. You see that? This is what I get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And by the way, notice, where's my code? Notice that it fills in from the top left corner, goes to the top right, and then fills in top to bottom. So basically it goes from left to right, top to bottom. Left to right, top to bottom. Now look, there are 10 cells allocated, but I only specified 6 elements. So this is blank, this is blank, this is blank, this is blank. If I specified all 10, literally it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Boom, just like that. All right? Firstly, notice that the size. Remember, column 2, 3, and 4 are fixed widths. The dimension stays the same. The width stays the same, and the rows are fixed. Those dimensions stay the same. But my columns 1 and 5, and subsequently 6 down here because of the edge, it's flexible with that FR unit, the fractional space unit. So watch when I mess around with the dimensions. See what happens? Right? Already I'm off the screen because I zoomed in. Any free space here, it collapses. It gets really, really small. See that? But these sizes are going off the screen, but they stay fixed. This is why we don't like doing these fixed widths, because when users zoom in or zoom out, the content should always stay on the page. It should just adjust itself. Well, we can't do that because our rows and those in columns 2, 3, and 4, they're fixed in pixels. Nothing we can do about that. Like if I go smaller here, you see how the sides now are getting bigger, right? Because the dimensions, again, in 2, 3, and 4 have to stay the same. We've made it fixed widths. So the free spaces now here are bigger. They're dividing it up. As the free spaces get smaller, they divide it up. Again, they get smaller too. And columns 2, 3, and 4 stay the same. It is what it is. We just got to roll with it, right? So basically, that's what's happening here at this point. Now, with that said, we are now ready to adjust our graph images. Now, you recall from last week when we have, let me show you again real quick. I forgot the name. Let's see, what is it? Top 10 and Team 10, right? Save to process it at the HTML page. Oops. All right. Come here. And you'll notice how big it is. How big and beautiful it is, all right? We want to squeeze, and they're great, but we want to squeeze, remember we're building a dashboard, we want to squeeze these graphs into these boxes. Now look, if it's too small in these boxes, we could always squeeze it in 2 boxes at a time, so 3 boxes at a time. So I'm literally going to have a graph 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, possibly another row if I wanted to. I could have 9 or 6. Or you could do, I've done like 2 by 2 by 2. It's up to you. All right, so I'll do 3 by 3 by 3. So we need to adjust these graphs, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to uniformly make all the PX images have a width of 266 and a height of 200. So come here. That's not bad. There we go. Yes. Go to my app.py file, and I'm going to make the changes. So for here, I will add that change before I even call any pix command. So I'll do it right here. Bam. All right, so I've added a default size for all the images now. All the PX images I do will have a width of 266 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. Now again, it would be great if I could use a more flexible unit of measurement instead of pixels. But can't. So we're going to have to fix it. All right, and just go with it. Now from here, my first image that I convert to HTML is the fig one. I want to customize this image. It's already customized to being width and height 266 and 200, right? So, I mean, and you guys can see this. Let's go ahead and process this. And let me show you what you guys are getting now. See, look what we got. It made it smaller. It made it smaller, but the problem is that the graph gets kind of scrunched up because we have the titles. In this one, I guess I removed the title already. And the fonts are still pretty big. We want, if we're going to make the graph smaller, we got to make the font smaller, right? So, and I probably perhaps even move that title over there, all right? And actually get rid of some of these margins. Look at all the space around it. So from here, I'm going to first update my fig object before I convert it to my HTML, right? And I will go ahead, let me just copy this. It's going to be ugly. Not good, but not that bad. Let's roll with it. Font equals. Now check this out. Right, every command for some reason gets passed in as a dictionary. So that's one weird thing going on here. It gets passed in with a dictionary within a dictionary. It's rather strange. But for now, that's the way it's done. All right. So the function we're using to update this is called update underscore layout. All right. It's a function within Fig that allows us to customize things. All right. So let me show you. Tab this in so it's easier to see. All right. So the first thing we're doing is y-axis, the y-axis keyword. We're changing that, again, tick font, the tickers for each tick space font for y-axis. I'm changing that to size equals 5. I'm doing the same thing for x-axis, right? I'm giving it a font size of 5. So the y-axis font is changing to 5. The x-axis is changing to 5. The overall font of the names of the values, or in this case, because we're using a bar graph, the categorical data under the x-axis, under the data points, that is also being changed to font 5, something smaller. Okay. In addition, I'm changing the margin all around the graph. The left side to 0, the right side to 0, the top side to be 0, and the bottom to be 0. And again, notice the strangeness of how everything is passed in as a dictionary. Every command is passed in like a dictionary. Again, very strange, but that's the way it works. All right, so this, I closed the parenthesis for this function update layout. So those are the different things I changed. And bam, we passed it in here. I'm going to do the same thing again for Fig 10. this case, I just have to change that name and everything else is the same. All right. Go ahead and process that. Now look what happened. Oh, you know what? I still have, let me drop the title. Let me drop this title right here, guys. So I have more space. There you go. See how it's much cleaner now? See how it's much cleaner? We can fit more. It's still small, but now we can squeeze it into those boxes. All right, and now, by default, what happens is whenever you have HTML tags, let me show you here, we have HTML elements, they just come down like vertically. This is why we set all this up, so that we can actually start putting these graphs in these boxes. All right, and so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to come to my HTML page, and now I'm going to first delete these ones, and I'm going to put my graphs in their spots. All right. Also, what I'm going to do is, I had the gray background there just for you guys easier to see. Let me just go ahead and delete that. If you like the gray background, keep it. If you wanted a different color, by all means, have at it. Go nuts. You guys can do whatever you want with it. All right. So here, now I refresh it. Ta-da! Oh, okay. See how it's still gray, guys? Even though we got rid of it. The weird thing with style.css is because it's a static file, the first time it gets loaded in, it gets cached in your browser. So this it gets annoying, but to force your browser to get the latest style.css, hold down the shift button and then do refresh, and then you'll see it gets the latest CSS. Ta-da! Right now we only did 2 graphs. We got to start now getting into our graphs, right? But I mean, just so from aesthetics point of view, what I can do is I can just cheat a little bit. Should I cheat? Cheat. Should I cheat? Well, let's go here. All right, so let's now. I'm just gonna keep repeating this, guys. Apologies for me doing this. We should actually create more graphs, but we will. And now module 9. We'll go ahead and create new graphs, and we'll get more intricate into Plotly.X. Now that we formatted everything, we're ready to go. And in module 10, finally, we'll have more interaction, opening up the graphs in different ways. Right? I don't know if we'll get to how much interactive we'll get, but we'll at least get to the point where you can click on the graph and it'll take you to a different, it'll expand it. It'll expand it for you in another page. All right? So we're going to introduce a little navigation for you guys in your page. And we'll hopefully get to forms. So here, and we'll throw another team one in there. Right? Because right now our graphs are blasé, and they don't say much, actually. I mean, they say a little bit, but, you know, you guys remember from ABI, we can get a little more intricate with this stuff. All right, we're gonna have much more information coming back. So, all right. And again, here's another thing I just want to point out, if it wasn't obvious. The reason why I have empty divs here is because I know that the first div is the FR1. It's going to be my first column, second, third, fourth, fifth. All right, I'm done with the first 5 columns. I'm going to go to the second row. The first row, first column, I want that to be empty as well because that's my free space. And then I do my second, third, fourth, my 7, 8, 9, if you will. And then my last column, again, that's going to be a free one. So that's why I keep that empty as well. And now, if I save this, it's saved. Come back here. What happened? Oh, sorry. I don't know what this is, guys. All right, let's try it again. Oh, interesting. It only lets each object process once. Fascinating. So let's do. It's wild. All right, fine. I have to do this the hard way. I'm gonna do this the hard way, guys. All right, I'll add. You know what? I'll just add one more graph, um, just so we can, just so you guys can view it. All right. So I have the top. Here I have the top players, salaries, team wise. So let me add another graph here. This one. Actually, no. I'll leave it at this. I don't want to add this because this is not in the code that I uploaded. So this. I wanted to show you guys how we added more graphs. Let me go ahead and change the HTML page back. So it seems like and actually this is something I didn't realize, I didn't know, because for Flask you can only do this, but apparently it only lets you process the graph you sent just once, which is very interesting. All right, that's fine. That's fine. Actually, it makes sense. All right, so let me go ahead and delete this. All right, I'll at least put that in the middle so you guys can see, have a little bit. Or actually, what I'll do is I will put this, there we go. In the second, so in the first one, I'll put it in the first row, top left, and the other team one I'll put in the bottom right, so it's easy for you guys to see. And now I'll reprocess this. Bam. All right. It's kind of small, so you would have to zoom in. Notice how you zoom in. The empty spaces on the side collapse, and now we have a makings. Finally, it's starting to look like like an online dashboard, reporting dashboard. All right, guys. All right, from here, Module 9, we got to finally mess around with our graphs. Hopefully, if I can find some more data loaded up, and we can have more fancy stuff going on. And Module 10, we'll have a little more interactive. We'll introduce the interaction aspect between the graphs and making the pages bigger, et cetera, et cetera. All right, guys. So, oh, before I do that, I almost forgot. Saved all this. I can't believe I almost forgot this. Please now open up your GitHub desktop. This is number one thing. If I can find it. Right there. Here you go. It's not letting me commit. I just typed in anything right here. Commit to main. Push origin. And again, I cannot stress how beautiful the system is. I put everything in GitHub. I don't even have to think about what I updated, what I didn't update, what I introduced. Just mindless. I just put it into GitHub, and then I come down here to Octeto. Log in. All right, and I simply then just do redeploy from my GitHub account. Wait for it, wait for it. It's processing. It's processing. All right, it's taking a while. It's taking a while. Oh, it's taking a while. you know what? Let me kill this browser. Maybe that's part of what's happening. All right. Looks like, click on this. What? Oh, it's still happening. Fast API. Connect to server. Ooh, okay. I believe. Let me bring my octeto down. Some of you guys had that mistake. All right, so let me get out of this. Deactivate. Let me do octeto down. Okay. And now, I believe I know the issue. No, I'm good. I'm going to. So this is taking a while for me. It should work for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and close it off right now. I don't want you guys to just sit here and stare at this video while this is processing. So I'm going to close this off. For the rest of you guys, this is just taking a long time. I think the problem is I should have probably closed out my octeto. I should have done octeto down before I loaded it. So now I'm just going to have to wait for this thing to take its due course, which looks like it's happening ever so slowly. For you guys, it'll be good. All right, so at this point, I'm going to log off, guys. Once you guys are finished loading this up, click on your endpoint, and you guys should see your graphs. Okay, guys, and properly formatted now. Properly formatted. All right, guys, have a good night. I'll see you guys in the next video or in class or in the Q&A session. All right, bye-bye.